Hi, Ian Roberts and Mastering Composition. So last week in that painting there was a great big foreground area and I lightened the shadow up so that we could see the colors and enter the painting through that shadow. And this week, this is the image we're going to look at. And I used those darks this week. You know, in photography, it doesn't have the range that our eye does. If we were standing there, we'd see all manner of things going on in the shadows. But the photograph is catching the light and just losing it in the darks. They're just going way too dark. But this week, I wanted to use those dark shadows so that I could get that sense of the little hits of light touching the tops of the plants. We'll still get some color in the shadow, but I'm going to push how dark it is. But here's the most important point. When we're talking about accuracy of values, we're not talking about accuracy of values in service of the photograph, or we're not even talking about accuracy of values in service of the way life looks, say if we're plein air painting. The only thing that's important is that we are using the accuracy of our values in service of our painting. That's the only thing that's interesting. It's the only thing that's important. We're designing the value masses to give us the maximum impact. And that's what we're looking for. So last week we softened the values. They were accurate for the painting. This week we're darkening the values. They're accurate for what we're trying to do. So the accuracy of your values has to do with what your intention is rather than what's in the photograph or even what's in life. So I hope you find this helpful and interesting, and I'll see you at the end. Bye for now. In the drawings I showed you a couple of weeks ago, you can see that I've just sort of created a horizontal there. And what I do is I darken it here and I start to sort of carve it this way to join the plants here, the bushes here, and bring us all the way out to there. The main thing to think about the shadows in this one is to compare them to last week. These shadows in here are now really dark, and that's what often happens when the camera just doesn't have the range that the human eye does. And I'm going to take advantage of how dark that is. I'm going to use that dark because I want to get these sort of little hits of light here as the light sort of rakes over everything. So I'm going to use the value in the photograph, not what I would see in life. So I have this foreground area here, a second foreground area we could say here, a transition to here that is pretty much becoming the same value as the background itself, and you can just see that's a jump in value. I'm going to get rid of that rock, so it's just a clean mass of water. And I'm going to have the horizon darker than it is, so it pulls us there, plus sort of some pink here. So I'm going to have foreground 1, foreground 2, background, and real background all the way back there. And each one is really a shift in value contrast. So this is 12 by 16, and you can see I'm just using yellow ochre, gridded, and they're just sort of giving you a sense of the sense I've got of these tall grasses in the foreground. And I wanted a hit of blue because this is just a haze that's sort of hanging over the morning sky, the coast. It's blue. It was blue sky up in one corner of it. So it's kind of a purple color coming down to the horizon, and then a nice sort of hit of blue that I'll soften a little bit. And then that blue is sort of getting grayed out. Now, I've already realized that blue on the horizon is too hard, a value contrast, so I'm softening it. And then there's the value I'm sort of choosing for the background. But you'll see, I keep adjusting this. You know, I've chosen a color, seemed to be the best one I could think of for the moment, the contrast of, say, right there against the sky and the water. And this part here is a little darker. You see, it's just a little darker than what's below it. And the tree shapes are a little darker. Very, very close in contrast though, right? And then the buildings are just a little bit lighter. Very close in contrast, and all really dull in in terms of color. And then I'm sort of really washing out the value right over on the left-hand side, the way it is in the photograph. See there, I've really started to push it because I really want that sense of kind of the misty quality coming out there. So that's just a value shift. And the waves I put in, I tried making them a little whiter than that, and they just popped. Now you can see I'm starting to draw into, using very small value shifts of trees and buildings to kind of give us that sense. Now here, you see how much warmer that color is than the background. Very close in value. And then here we're starting to get into the darks. It's kind of a dark alizarin, and then this color is really dark, right? This is sort of like exactly what the camera sees, not what the eye would see. But I wanted to take advantage of that real contrast so I could make those little hits of light work. And you'll see, I'll be putting some colors back into it. I just went dark. See here, I'm starting to put green back into those darks. So with the shadow side of the bush, I'm starting to carve a color now that's got some green in it. So you can see there's a pretty wide variety of colors in there. Then just look at how, in terms of value, those two little marks I made as it goes back to the back into the distance there. And this is still shadowed, right? I'm really putting some greens in there that really say, oh, this is the shadow side of a green object. And there's the first hit of sunlight. And you see the value shift. And they're very distinct. Lit side, dark side, warm and cool, but clearly the value shift. Wherever it's in light, it's in light. Wherever it's in shadow, you can see that it's dark. Now there's going to be an exception that I'll show you in a second. But there I'm starting to put in some sort of paler grays in the shadow. This is still the shadow. And there's some of these little marks here. This is still in shadow because there'll be lights on top of that, right sort of hitting the light, just hitting the tips of those edges that we'll see are much lighter in the end. So it looks light, looks like it could be lit, but as we go down, you'll see that it. So in each case, we've got this quality of between light and dark. It sort of shifts in the same way, so that whatever's in light is in light, whatever's in shadow is in shadow, and you don't mix the two. Because if you start getting things in the shadows that are too light, then you'll just confuse us. Within reason, those little pale gray things that I put in are too light until you see the lit side of the other one. And there you can see I'm putting in some warms that are not really in the light, and there some little hits of that kind of red plant in there. This is still in shadow though, but it's starting to get some real color in it. But this is still shadow. And then here are the first sort of hits of the tall grasses. And you can see I'm not trying to get them all in. Just a few to kind of say against that dark, and we'll say, oh yeah, tall grasses. We won't have any confusion about what's going on. You'll see I'll continue muddling around with them. Because there's still a lot of edges here that I can see. Now you've got those tiny little touches of light that are just sort of telling us, oh, I see those individual bits that are just catching the light here. I could obviously use much a smaller brush, but there, now I'm getting the lit side of those things. So that just gives the sense of the light touching the top of it. And we just get that sense of lit side, light just raking over these plants down into the dark shadows. And so I'm using those dark shadows to exaggerate the sense of the light. And there's the lit side of the red little bushes, bits of bush I'd put in before. So I'm just going to continue working and modulating the edges. There's the finished painting. So let's talk again about accurate values. Not values that are accurate to the photo, but accurate for the use of the painting. You remember we had the idea of a structure that was taking us like that. The idea was to go from a foreground to a second foreground to a background, back into the far distance. Now, you can see the quality of the edges there, compared to say there, are releasing the attention here and pulling us this way. And then we come around to here, we can see that the contrast between the background and that sort of mid-background is very, very light, because I do not want a hard edge that pulls us out of the painting. And you can see that I've taken all these big rocks and things out of the water with the idea that that's a simple shape that is just forcing us in, and all these shadows are doing the same, so that our main attention is doing this back to these two shapes here, which have sort of a lot of contrast against the sky. And then we just slowly get pulled, and look at how soft the value shifts are out here with the rocks and the waves. You know, so often you're sort of putting these really black rocks and really white waves, and they're way too much contrast. And then there's just this final pull to that soft pink edge way in the distance. So as always, I hope you found that helpful. Please do like the video if you liked it, and please do subscribe, and do sign up on my email list to get that new 20-minute video on mastering composition. I'll see you next week. I hope you have a great week. I hope you get out painting. Bye for now.